Good afternoon. Welcome to Tech University. My name is Bill Johnson. I'll be guiding you through today's webinar. Today's webinar will be focused on proper repair of sound suppression tires. Before we get into the actual repair of our sound suppression tires, the first thing I want to do is I want to first make you aware of one of the features of the Teams program that we are utilizing today. So with this program, you will not be able to directly talk to me to ask any questions if you have any that come up throughout today's presentation. So in order to ask questions, please use the Q&A button. So that'll be a little icon, looks like a couple comment boxes with a question mark. Just simply click on that icon, type in your question, hit submit, and then at the end of the presentation, I will go over any questions that were submitted and take a few minutes to answer those. Now, when we talk about proper tire repair, Tech has come up with an acronym to help technicians to hopefully better remember the order and all the proper steps for doing a proper repair. And that is simply the word repair. So what repair means is we've got R, which means we have to remove the tire from the wheel so we can do a full inspection both inside and out. We got E for evaluating the injury, getting a feel for the size and angle of the injury, whether it is repairable. P for preparing the injury area. This is where we're going to take our buffing wheels, carbide cutters, and prepare the inner liner and drill out the injury. A for applying the vulcanizing fluid. I for installing the repair, and then finally R for return the tire to service. Now, even with the sound suppression tires, we will still be basically following this same repair process. Now, you may be asking yourself, if you're not familiar with them already, what exactly is a sound suppression tire? Well, a sound suppression tire is going to be a tire similar to what I've got in my hands here. It's going to be a passenger tire that is typically found on your electric vehicles, your EVs for short. EVs typically have those electric motors that drive those vehicles don't produce hardly any sound. So any sound from outside sources such as the sounds your tires make are going to be more noticeable inside the cabin. So what tire manufacturers have done is they've added this foam insert on the inside of the tire to help absorb some of that sound that the tires are creating when they're rolling across the road. And that helps to reduce the amount of noise that they're creating inside of the cabin. Now, with the added foam layer on these tires, that does present some added challenges when it comes to performing a tire repair. And that's what we're going to cover today, is how we're going to fix these tires here. So the first step in the process, like we said before, is going to be R, which is for remove the tire from the wheel. So now we'll watch a quick video, kind of go over that remove step in the process.
And welcome to our sound suppression passenger tire puncture repair course. In this video, we're going to teach you how to remove and inspect a tire with a crown area puncture. Always remember the Tech REPAIR method. The first step in proper tire repair is R, which stands for remove the tire from the wheel and inspect the tire. Removing the tire from the wheel also allows you to fully inspect the tire from the inside out and look for any non-repairable conditions. Remember, your role as a tire technician is to inspect and assess whether or not a tire is repairable or non-repairable, and most importantly, whether the tire is safe to return to service. Your inspection should include the bead area, the sidewalls, the tread area, and the inside of the tire. As you discover any injuries, mark them with a high-quality marker. When the tire is inspected, there are several conditions deemed by the tire industry guidelines as non-repairable conditions, and these include an injury greater than 1/4 of an inch for passenger tires or 3/8 of an inch for steel body ply truck tires, a tire that has been run flat or shows underinflated conditions, tire inner liner separations, tire casing separations, excessive tread wear, exposed body plies or cables, deformed bead or exposed fabric steel, ozone cracking, damage from impacts, and any injury greater than 25 degrees requires a 2-piece repair be used.
All right, so when we remove that tire from the wheel, the reason we got to remove that tire from the wheel is because we do have to make sure we do a full inspection on not only the outside of the tire, but also the inside. A lot of non-repairable conditions might appear on the outside of the, or on the inside of the tire, but not the outside. So if you're just plugging a tire or doing an on-the-wheel repair and not taking that tire off the wheel for a proper inspection, there's a good chance you could miss non-repairable conditions inside the tire. So look for any of those conditions that you saw in the video there. Keep in mind that is not an all-inclusive list. There are other conditions besides what we just saw in the video that could lead to a non-repairable tire. But make sure you take that tire off the wheel, do your full inspection, and then we can move on to the next step in the process, which is E for evaluate the injury.
Hi again, Izzy from Tech, and in this training course, we're going to cover the second step in the Tech 6-step repair method, which is E for evaluate the injury. As you evaluate the injury to a tire, if the object that punctured the tire is still present, you need to remove it. This is the perfect time to visually examine the injured area of the tire. Before inspecting the injury in a sound suppression tire, you need to remove a small amount of the sound deadening foam from around the injury. To do this, use a sharp knife to cut through the foam roughly 2 inches both above and below the injury. Be careful not to cut too deep. This can result in damaging the tire casing and ruining the tire. Once the foam is cut, remove the section of foam from the tire. After the foam is removed, you'll need to examine the adhesive under the foam. The type of adhesive that is used will determine how to proceed with the repair. If the adhesive is strips of cured adhesive, like you see here, then the tire can be repaired in a similar fashion to a standard tire casing. If the adhesive is a tacky, uncured adhesive, as you see with this tire, then the procedure will have to be altered significantly. Once it's determined which type of adhesive is present, use Tech's TRT 105 inspection tool to quickly and precisely measure the size and the angle of the injury. The injury size and angle are 2 critical pieces you will need to select and install the appropriate repair. Please note, if the injury angle exceeds 35 degrees, a 2-piece repair must be used. 2-piece repair should only be used if the adhesive used to apply the foam was a cured adhesive that can be buffed. If, however, the adhesive is extremely tacky, the tire may need to be replaced as a 2-piece repair is not recommended. Refer back to Tech's training course on 2-piece repairs if you need a refresher on this procedure. Remember, the injury size and location will also determine the repairability of the tire. To be considered a puncture repair, the injuries must be located in the crown area of the tire and not exceed 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters after preparation. If the injury does not fall within these limitations, the tire will need to be replaced. Once again, injuries in the shoulder and sidewall areas cannot be repaired with a Tech Uniseal Ultra Repair. In this example, the injury is less than 35 degrees and in the crown area of the tire, so a Tech Uniseal Ultra Repair can be used. Here we can see the injury has accepted the tool just below the second line. This calls for the use of a Tech 250 UL Uniseal Ultra Repair for 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeter injury. This concludes Tech Sound Suppression Puncture Repair course, evaluating.
Okay, so in order to properly evaluate the injury in a sound suppression tire, we first need to remove a small section of this foam material. So to do that, what we're going to do is we'll take a sharp knife and we'll cut roughly 2 inches both above and below where the injury is at. Cut through the foam, being careful not to cut too deep with that knife. If you cut too deep, you could actually cut into the casing and possibly further damage or possibly even ruin the casing. So carefully cut through that foam, both 2 inches above and below the injury, and then completely pull out that section of foam. Now, once we have that foam removed, we need to look at that adhesive layer that's used to adhere the foam to the casing. There's basically 2 different types of adhesives that we've seen in the marketplace that are used to adhere this foam. Some, like this one here, have an adhesive layer that goes all the way across the face of the tread to adhere the foam. And this type of adhesive that is used on this tire is fairly still kind of gooey and tacky. You will notice that the foam can be a little bit more difficult to remove with that type of adhesive in the tire. But also with that type of adhesive, your repair process is going to have to change. Because with this type of adhesive, you will not be able to buff the inner liner because it's nearly impossible to remove that adhesive from the area that you're going to be working on. So with that process, we'll actually have to skip with that type of adhesive, we will have to skip the buffing process. So our repair process will change quite a bit. Now, the other types of tires that we see out there are going to be more like this one here, where we've got basically strips of more of a cured type adhesive. So the adhesive is hardened. It's lost it doesn't have any tack to it. Now with this type of adhesive, we will actually be able to buff that adhesive out of the tire. So we'll be able to prepare the inside of the tire more like a conventional tire. We'll do all of our pre-cleaning, buffing, and drilling like we typically do with a standard passenger tire. So identify that type of adhesive that is used so that we can determine what our repair process is going to have to be. Keep in mind, if we've got a tire more like this that has that tacky kind of gooey adhesive on the inner liner, the only option for repair on that tire is going to be a uniseal type repair. So we will have to put a uniseal in that tire. With the tires that have more of the cured or the hardened adhesive, uniseal repair is preferred, but a 2-piece repair is still acceptable for those tires as well. So once we've identified the type of adhesive, then we need to use our TRT 105 measuring tool and measure the injury for both size and angle. Now keep in mind, if the angle exceeds 35 degrees, a 2-piece repair will have to be used on those tires that have the cured adhesive. If it's the type of tire that has the tacky kind of gooey adhesive, then we may end up having to scrap that tire because a uniseal will not work with that excessive angle, and a 2-piece repair really is not recommended on those tires. The other thing we have to identify is the size of the injury. So since we are dealing with passenger tires, any injuries that go past the second line here on the TRT 105 are going to mean it's larger than 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch, and that tire will have to be replaced. So once you've evaluated that injury, determined that the injury is repairable, and you figured out the next steps in your process for that particular tire, then we move on to the next step in the repair process, which is P for prepare the injury.
Well, hello, it's Izzy from Tech, and in this training course, we're going to talk about the third step in the Tech process, which is P, prepare the injury. If you're working on a sound suppression tire with a cured adhesive, it is recommended to pre-clean the inner liner prior to buffing. If the adhesive is tacky, then cleaning the inner liner with a Rub-O-Matic is not recommended. This tire has a cured adhesive, so we will proceed with cleaning the inner liner. Spray or pour Tech Rub-O-Matic on the area to be cleaned. And while the area is still moist, use a rubber scraper to remove any contaminating substances. This process should be repeated 3 times to guarantee complete removal of contaminants such as silicone mold lubricants used in the tire's manufacturing process. Failure to remove these materials can lead to contamination of the repair area and possible repair unit failure. It will also help prolong the life of your buffing wheel by preventing buildup on the tool. Next, center the appropriate Tech Repair template over the injury and using a tire marker, trace around the edge of the template. Now the line you traced around the template will serve as a guide for mechanical buffing of the inner liner. If the template is unavailable, freehand trace an area 1/2 inch larger than the repair unit. This will ensure the buffed area is large enough for proper installation of the repair unit. If the tire has a tacky adhesive, the buffing step can be skipped. It is not possible to buff the tire when this type of adhesive is present, so we will have to move on to the drilling process with these tires. Mechanically buff within the marked area using a low RPM buffer. Make sure your buffer does not exceed 5,000 RPMs. If the speed of the tool exceeds 5,000 RPMs, scorching of the rubber surface will occur, which will greatly reduce the adhesion of the repair unit to the inner liner. Also, be sure to use an appropriate buffing wheel to achieve a number 1 or number 2 buff texture. Mechanical buffing ensures proper adhesion of the repair unit to the inner liner by creating a clean textured surface. When buffing the inner liner, be sure to run the buffing wheel from side to side across the inner liner as shown. This will prevent cutting grooves into the inner liner and promotes better adhesion of the repair to the tire. After you've achieved the proper buff texture, we'll use the appropriate size Tech carbide cutter in a low speed drill with maximum RPMs of 1200 to properly prepare the injury. This will also be the next step if the tire has a tacky adhesive. Now drill out the injury from the inside of the tire and repeat this process a minimum of 3 times. Next, repeat this procedure 3 times from the outside of the tire to ensure proper injury preparation. After drilling the injury on a tire with a tacky adhesive, it may be necessary to clean the carbide cutter afterward. To do this, simply take a wire brush to remove any adhesive that may be stuck on the cutter. This concludes Tech Sound Suppression Tire Puncture Repair. Prepare the injury.
Okay, so when we begin the prepare process, before we can do any buffing or drilling, if it's a tire that has the cured adhesive, first thing we need to do is take a Rub-O-Matic and an inner liner scraper, pour a little bit of, or scrape, or pour or spray a little bit of the Rub-O-Matic over the area that we're going to be buffing, and then use the scraper to clean away any contaminants that might either interfere with the bonding process of the repair to the tire or potentially get clogged up in your buffing wheel. So once the area is clean, then we buff that area on the inner liner. So we use, Tech always recommends using the one of the Tech premium buffing wheels here. Use that on your low RPM buffer and always run that side to side across the buff surface. That'll create a nice uniform texture. Typically want about a number 1 to 2 buff texture on the inside of that tire. And then once the buffing process is complete, you have that nice smooth texture across that entire area that you marked. Then we will drill the injury from both the inside and outside to make sure that we get all of the damage inside of the injury channel completely removed. Now when we drill the injury out, because we're going to use one of the Tech carbide cutters. So when we're using the 250 UL, we'll use the 270 carbide cutter. This carbide cutter should always be used on a low speed drill. Keep in mind the maximum recommended speed for your carbide cutters is 1200 RPM. Most of your tire buffers are rated at speeds of 2600 RPM or higher. So scorching could occur if you're not being careful using the carbide cutters in a buffer. Now, if you're drilling out the injuries in one of the tires that has that tacky gooey adhesive, it may be necessary to get your inner liner scraper out and use this to try to push or scrape some of that adhesive away from the injury channel. You won't be able to remove much, but if you can at least get some of that adhesive away from the hole, it'll reduce the amount of adhesive that's getting clogged up on your carbide cutter, and then also reduce the amount of that adhesive that you're pulling through the tire. So you will have to, if you're running the carbide cutter through a tire that has that tacky adhesive, you will have to clean it off afterwards because some of that adhesive will get on there. So once you've drilled the injury from both the inside and outside, simply take a wire brush and clean any adhesive off of that carbide cutter before using that cutter on another tire. And then just the main thing as far as getting the repair to adhere to that, the tackier adhesives, just make sure that you remove as much of that foam material as possible, and small pieces might remain stuck to that adhesive after you pull the larger chunk of the foam out of there. So simply pick off as much of the foam as you can so that you have as much of the tacky adhesive exposed as possible, and then the repair would just adhere directly to that adhesive. So once you've got the injury area prepared, so buffed and drilled if it's a tire with the cured strips of adhesive, drilled if it's the tire with the tacky gooey adhesive, then we move on to the next step in the process, which is to apply the vulcanizing fluid.
From Tech Tire and Wheel, and in this course I'm going to cover the fourth step in the tech repair method for proper tire repair. The A in tech's process represents applying the vulcanizing fluid. So let's get started. If the inner liner was buffed, you now need to remove any leftover debris using a soft wire brush on a low RPM buffer. Lightly brush from the right side of the prepared surface to the left side to remove loose buffing dust and steel shavings from the buffed surface. This is an important step to create a clean, prepared surface to maximize repair unit adhesion. You may need to repeat this process 2 to 3 times to ensure that all buffing dust and steel shavings are removed. Do not use a compressed air line for this procedure. The compressed air may contain moisture and oil that will contaminate the buffed surface. Now vacuum all buffing dust and steel shavings from the tire. Avoid contacting the buffed surface with the vacuum, as this can contaminate your prepared surface, which will compromise repair unit adhesion. Next, whether you've buffed the inner liner surface or left the tacky adhesive alone, it's time to apply Tech 760 chemical vulcanizing fluid to the injury channel. Work the fluid into the injury from inside the tire using a spiral cement tool. When inserting the tool, be sure to rotate in a clockwise direction. This procedure should be repeated 3 to 5 times from both the inside and outside of the tire, depending on the thickness of the tire. Finally, you will leave the spiral cement tool in the injury from the outside of the tire to prevent the vulcanizing fluid from drying completely. If the inner liner was buffed, apply a thin, even coat of Tech chemical vulcanizing fluid to the buffed surface of the inner liner. And here's the tip. If the adhesive is tacky, do not apply vulcanizing fluid outside of the injury channel or to any unprepared surfaces. This could lead to contamination of the repair area and the can of vulcanizing fluid. You need to allow approximately 3 to 5 minutes for the vulcanizing fluid to dry. Additional drying time is required in cold and humid climates. Vulcanizing fluid must be completely dry before applying the repair to avoid trapping solvent under the repair, which could create air bubbles and ultimately result in the repair failing. There you have it. This concludes Tech Sound Suppression Tire Puncture Repair course, applying the vulcanizing.
Okay, so we've got the area buffed and drilled. So the next step in the process is to apply the vulcanizing fluid. Now, before we can apply that vulcanizing fluid, we do have to clean that buff surface and remove any of the buffing dust, steel shavings from the repair area and the inside of the tire. So to do that, first thing we'll do is get our wire brush, such as this Tech S892, mount that up on our low speed buffer and lightly go over the buff surface from right to left and remove any buffing dust, steel shavings, if it's a tire that has the cured strips of adhesive. Keep in mind, if it's the if that tire has the tacky adhesive all the way across the tread area, then we will not be using the wire brush, because all that's going to do is just gum up that wire brush. So for those for the cured strip adhesive type tires, then use the wire brush. Like I said, lightly work from right to left to remove that adhesive, and then we will take the vacuum and remove any of the buffing dust and steel shavings from the inside of the tire. Next thing we'll do is we will take our 760, our chemical vulcanizing fluid, and our spiral cement tool, put a little bit of the vulcanizing fluid on the spiral cement tool, and then run that through the injury, turning the tool clockwise as you push it through. That'll help spread that vulcanizing fluid all the way through the injury channel and help promote adhesion of the uniseal stem to the inside of that injury. Repeat that process 2 to 3 times to make sure that vulcanizing fluid gets all the way through the injury channel. Keep in mind, if it is the tire that has the tacky adhesive, that's the only vulcanizing fluid that we're going to apply to the tire, just using the spiral cement probe. We will not apply any vulcanizing fluid to that tacky adhesive, because that adhesive will adhere directly to the repair unit without the use of the cement. If we apply 760 to that tacky adhesive, then the repair might actually not adhere properly to that adhesive, and it could potentially come loose over time. So if it's a tire that has the cured adhesives, once we've got the injury channel cemented, then we'll take the brush out of our can of vulcanizing fluid and then apply a light, even coat of chemical vulcanizing fluid to the entire buff surface of that tire. Then we will have to allow that vulcanizing fluid to completely dry, which takes about 3 to 5 minutes. Could potentially take a little bit longer in cold or humid conditions, but typically about a 3 to 5 minute dry time on your 760. Let that fully dry before moving on to the next step in the process, which is I for install the repair.
From Tech, and today we'll be going over the 5th step in the tech repair process, which is I for install the repair. In our previous course, you applied the vulcanizing fluid and have allowed enough time for it to completely dry. Next, you will prepare the Uniseal Ultra Repair Unit for installation. Begin by removing the protective poly covering from the stem by twisting and pulling the stem to break the poly free. Next, reposition the poly on the repair to expose the center of the repair unit. A word of caution, touching the cushion gum will cause contamination that may lead to repair failure. This is why you will use the plastic piece as a place to hold the repair. Now apply Tech 760 chemical vulcanizing fluid to the black tapered area of the stem only. This ensures proper lubrication to make the insertion of the repair unit easier. If you're using a tire spreader, be sure to relax the tire beads to prevent what is known as bridging of the repair unit. Bridging creates areas where portions of the repair are not making full contact with the tire's inner liner, and this can lead to premature failure of the repair. You may now remove the spiral cement tool, then feed the lead wire of the Uniseal Ultra into the injury from the inside of the tire. Next, grasp the lead wire on the outside of the tire with a pair of pliers and carefully begin to pull the Uniseal Ultra into the injury. Pull until the repair unit seats against the inner liner. Be sure not to overpull. This will cause dimpling and possible breakage of the stem. Once the Uniseal Ultra is in place, press down on the center of the repair unit with your thumb. Now, using your stitcher, stitch the repair unit down, working from the center outward. This process removes any air which might be trapped between the repair unit and inner liner of the tire. Exert firm pressure on the stitcher to maximize adhesion. After partially stitching the repair, remove the colored poly from under the edges and continue stitching to the edges of the repair. After stitching is completed, make sure to remove the clear protective covering found on the cap of the repair as shown. Now you will go to the outside of the tire and cut off the Uniseal Ultra stem approximately 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters above the tire's outer surface. The Uniseal Ultra stem is now properly in place. This concludes Tech Sound Suppression tire puncture repair, installing the repair.
Okay, so once you've applied your vulcanizing fluid and allowed the proper time for it to dry, then we need to begin the process of installing our Uniseal. So to do that, first we need to, of course, remove that plastic as you saw in the video. So twist and pull on that stem to break the plastic loose on the stem, and then peel that off, and then reposition the poly on the cap here so that you have a way to handle that repair without touching and contaminating the cushion gum. Then we need to take our vulcanizing fluid and apply a little bit of the vulcanizing fluid just on the black tapered portion of the stem here. We do not want to apply the vulcanizing fluid here to the cushion gum portion of the stem. If we get the vulcanizing fluid on this portion of the stem, what will happen is as we pull that stem through the tire, the tire is actually going to scrape that vulcanizing fluid off, and it'll end up puddling underneath the cap here, which will lead to that solvent evaporating underneath the repair unit, creating air pockets, which could possibly cause the repair to fail. So apply the vulcanizing fluid only to the black tapered portion of the stem to help lubricate the stem, make it easier to pull through the tire. Insert that lead wire into the injury from the inside of the tire, and then pull that repair until it seats firmly against the inside of the tire. Try not to pull so hard that you create a big crater in the center of the repair that could potentially weaken that repair and cause it not to function properly. Once you've got the repair down in place, take your stitcher and stitch that repair unit always from the center out. That helps to remove as much air as possible from underneath that repair unit. And always make sure you're putting firm pressure on the stitcher. The more pressure you're putting on that stitcher, the better that repair is going to bond to the tire. Once you've got that repair unit stitched down thoroughly, of course, get the center down first, then pull the blue plastic out from underneath it, then stitch it the rest of the way. Then we can go to the outside and cut that stem off. And then that would bring us to the final step in the repair process, which is R for return the tire to service.
Hi, Izzy again from Tech, and it's hard to believe that we are almost finished with the final step in our 6-step one-piece repair process. Today's course is R, which stands for Return the Tire to Service. Before we get to step 6, just a few items to follow up on to finish the repair installation process. When repairing a sound suppression tire with a cured adhesive, seal the edge of the repair unit and the overbuffed area with Tech number 738 security coat or number 739 butyl liner repair sealer. These repair sealers help to restore the air retention properties of the buffed inner liner beyond the area covered by the repair as shown. If you wish to reinstall the foam that was removed at the beginning of the process, apply the liner sealer to the entire area where that foam was removed. Then place the foam back in the tire and press it down for a minute or 2. If the adhesive is still tacky, then the foam can be reinserted without the use of an inner liner sealer. So what all is entailed in returning the tire to service? Well, we have to remount the tire to the wheel, then balance the tire and wheel assembly, then install the wheel assembly to the vehicle following proper procedures, and if the vehicle is equipped with TPMS, relearn the system if necessary. Congratulations, you have completed the last course in Tech Sound Suppression Tire Puncture Repair course.
Okay, so once you've got the repair installed, the last step in the process is to, of course, return that tire to service. Now, before we can do that, there's one last step we need to do inside the tire, which is to apply our inner liner sealant. So you can either install the 738 security coat, or we have the 739 butyl liner repair sealer. Now, keep in mind that if the tire is one of the tires that had the cured adhesive strips, we will need to apply this around the injury to any buffed surfaces that are not covered by that repair unit. Now, if the tire has the tacky kind of gooey adhesive, the liner sealers may not be necessary. And then if you want to reinstall that foam, the way you reinstall the foam is going to depend on, once again, the type of adhesive that was installed inside of that tire. Now, if it's the tire that has that tacky adhesive that goes all the way across, in most cases that adhesive will still be tacky enough that you can simply take the foam that you pulled out of that tire and reinstall it. Just press it down right on top of that adhesive, and that'll hold that foam back in place. If it's one of the tires that has the cured strips of adhesives, what we're going to have to do is we will take our liner sealer, whether it's the 739, the butyl liner repair sealer, or the security coat, either one will work. Simply coat the entire area where we've removed that section of foam, cover that entire area with your liner sealer, then reinstall the foam, kind of press it down, hold that in place for a minute or two so that it can kind of dry and tack up a little bit, and that will actually be able to hold that foam back in place. Reinstalling the foam is an optional step. It's not a step that you have to do, but if that's a step that you do want to do to kind of make that tire as much like it was originally, then those liner sealers will hold that foam back in place for you so you can reinstall it. Then once you get that the liner sealer on, get the foam reinstalled, if that's what you decide to do, then you can go through the process of putting that tire back in service. So remounting the tire, balancing the tire and wheel assembly, reattaching to the vehicle, following our proper risk procedures, and then doing a relearn on that TPMS system if necessary. And there you have it. That is the process for repairing a sound suppression tire. We did have a couple of questions come through. One of the questions we had was, why do you have to drill the injury? The reason we're going to drill the injury is because when an object punctures that tire, it doesn't make a clean hole. It's always going to leave some cuts and splits in that rubber, possibly some separation between the layers of the belt package or the casing ply, and you're going to have loose fabric and steel cables in there. So the purpose of that carbide cutter is to clean out all that damaged material and make a nice round hole, which actually helps to strengthen the tire. So that's why we're going to drill the injury every time we have an injury in that tire, and then always make sure we fill that injury so that moisture and debris doesn't get in there and create additional damage. One other question we had was we had one of our viewers ask if it was possible to access the videos that we were seeing in this presentation, and the answer is yes. We actually have these videos as well as several other tire repair videos on our Tech University training portal. Which you can find that at either on our website at techtirerepairs.com/training. You'll find links to Tech University there, or you can go directly to techtirerepairs.tortle.net. We have a extensive library of tire repair training courses on Tech University. So for just a small $50 fee, that gives you an annual subscription. That's $50 for the shop. So if the shop manager or owner subscribes, they can add any additional technicians underneath their account at no additional cost. So it is $50 per year per shop. Now I do want to point out that we have a promo going on exclusive to people that are joining us for today's webinar. If you decide to log on and register for Tech University, enter the promo code WEB02, and that'll get you 25% off of that annual subscription. So looks like we did have another question just came through. Someone was asking if we still use the vulcanizing fluid with the more tacky adhesive. Keep in mind, we do use the vulcanizing fluid through the injury channel, through the hole that we drilled out, but not on the surface of that adhesive. If we apply the vulcanizing fluid to the surface of that tacky adhesive, that could actually take away that tack, and the repair might not adhere properly to that adhesive anymore. So on that type of adhesive, we are only